if you're a trauma victim, there's hope for you that you can heal. You can never get rid of trauma. It's inside of you, but you can certainly learn how to manage it and be happier and maybe transform who you are into a much better version.
Hello, and welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickle, and our guest today is Willie Handler. And this is going to be a most interesting podcast. And I've been really looking forward to this because we're going to dive into some stuff that isn't talked about too much. And so, a little bit about Willie is he is a survivor also of childhood trauma, but he also inherited trauma from his parents who are Holocaust victims. Actually, excuse me, victims and survivors. Let's say survivors. And he is also the author of Out of the Shadow. And he's writing a second book. He's right in the middle of it right now. And I'm really looking forward to this one. And this one's going to be about intergenerational trauma based on 100 interviews of descendants of Holocaust survivors. So I find that absolutely fascinating. I'm looking forward to when that's coming out. And then some of the topics we're going to kind of talk about are intergenerational trauma. I think that's going to be the majority of our conversation, but also touching a little bit on the healing process from the perspective of a victim. So Willie, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story and getting this interesting information out there about intergenerational trauma.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's a topic that's important to me, and I really would like to share it with others.
You know, I haven't done a lot of research on this, but I have followed other experts who talk about the intergenerational trauma that is passed down generational, and specifically about the intergenerational trauma that happens with the Holocaust survivors. And so tell us what you know about this, because obviously you've dived deep into this. You're not only are you a survivor, but you've done your research on this as well. So tell us more about it.
And just to mention, this is intergenerational trauma is not unique to the Jewish community, and
Correct.
right, um, it is within the Afro American community and Native people, and really any survivors from war.
Yeah.
Vietnam veterans, as an example. But this was it's an interesting genesis because it was not something I ever intended to write about. I never even intended on writing a memoir.
Mm.
And I should tell the audience, not that I'm plugging, but I've been an author for a little while, and I was writing humorous novels. Nothing like,
Nothing
nothing
like
like
this.
Nothing like this, right, exactly. And, I remember early in the pandemic, um, my wife was pushing me to write my family story, and I kinda was thinking I'm going, "Ah, there's thousands of Holocaust books out there. Does the world really need another one?" And, I started, digging. And I didn't really know much, actually, because my parents didn't really talk about it. My father, if you were to ask him a question, he would answer it, and then he would start. If you have asked another question, he would start getting very emotional and invariably start to cry.
Hmm.
And as a child, you learn, let's not ask any questions.
Let's not upset dad.
Right. You as a child of a survivor, you're really trying to protect your parents because
Hmm.
they've experienced enough pain.
Right.
And so my wife kind of I started digging in and started uh trying to find information. I remember the first piece of writing I did is I did my parents' stories on a blog post. It was 1,800 words. That's all I knew at the time. And I started digging up information, and I went to many sources, databases, archives, history books, all kinds of articles. I tracked down survivor testimonies that were relevant. And I finally, it was like falling into one of these rabbit holes, and it was the
Mhm.
pandemic. And so I decided I was going to write it, but I was writing it for my family because
Mhm.
I was, what I started to discover was things that not only I didn't know, definitely no one else in the family knew. And I approached it like any other book I'd written before, but it didn't quite work out that way. It was quite transformational. It forced me to examine who I was, how I felt about my parents, all my relationships, my priorities in life. And this wasn't a, it was not an easy journey. And then I kind of fell apart at one point and
Mm.
landed in therapy.
Mhm.
So it was, but, and it was worth all the pain that I went through. And so, because what happened was that as memories of my childhood and other things started um, coming back to me, all this trauma became released. And
Oh.
that's
Oh, you
exactly
mean
what
released
happened.
into your mind, like you became aware of it. Is that
Oh,
what you meant?
yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Yeah. I had done such a
Mm.
great job in burying it for
Ugh.
decades.
Mm.
And it just all came out at once. And literally,
Oh.
I fell apart.
Yeah, that's way too much. That's very overwhelming. I could totally understand that.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And I've now been in therapy almost a year and a half. And I'm in like much better shape. I remember going when I first went to the therapist, and she says, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Well, I wrote this memoir." And she goes, "Yeah." And I'm going, um, I'm terrified that people, when people read it, like it's creating so much anxiety. And I said, I couldn't possibly stand up in front of people to talk about it. So that was
Mm.
really, I wasn't there. I didn't say I'm suffering from trauma. It was more about anxiety, which
Right.
was really the trauma.
Right. It was all
And
the everything bubbling up in you.
right. And
Mhm.
so as we spoke, session after session, it all started coming together. And the way therapy works is you get worse before you get better.
Yes, yeah. I
And
describe it as like spring cleaning. You're pulling everything out, it gets really messy, and then you reorganize it and put it away. But it gets messy. It gets very messy for a bit.
and at one point, I was quite upset with her because um, I told her she was making me worse, which is kind of true. And
Kind of is.
twice I quit and quickly came back. She was very understanding. I'm sure
You're not the
probably wasn't.
first.
No, I'm not. I was not the first. And but slowly, slowly over time, I got better. So when the memoir that I was so terrified about coming out, when it finally was released in November, I was fine. It was, instead of being terrified, I I was able to celebrate and enjoy the moment, and it worked out really, really well.
Well, tell us about the book then. So tell us what you discovered and more about this intergenerational trauma, 'cause it's
Okay,
so
what did
interesting.
I discover?
So let me ask you this first. So
Mhm.
are you saying that you just became aware of the depth of your trauma within the last few years?
Yes,
Do you
trauma.
know?
If you would ask me 5 years ago, do you have any trauma? I'm going, what? No,
Mhm.
none.
Yeah.
I, people would. I read books about intergenerational trauma, and I'm going, yeah, but that's not me. You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
the family dynamics might have been the same, but I'm going,
Mhm.
that's not who
Yeah.
I don't have that. I and and we can talk about this a little more. Um, there's a lot of Holocaust survivors who exhibited no evidence of of any trauma whatsoever, and they raised families, and they were what I would say kind of like happy households. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
probably the best description. So it does happen, but
It
it
does.
takes but you have to you have to but you never know when you will be triggered.
Right, because and the reason why I asked that question is there's a statistic out, and I know this to be true with other types of trauma as well, or abuse, and that is that women who are sexually abused, on average, it's between the ages of 13 and 17, and it takes them 4 decades before they'll even open their mouth and share it. And I know that to be true with other types of
Hmm.
trauma and as well as abuse, because in helping women I've experienced that. I even experienced that myself. I recognized that my brother was abusing me, but I didn't see my parents' part in it until many years later. So it's not
Hmm.
uncommon.
Yeah, and in some cases it it might be because of the stigma, but in other
Yeah.
cases it's just kind of pushed aside,
Right.
and you go on with your life, not ever thinking about it, not even realizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And k- I'm I wonder, I just wonder, had I never written the memoir,
Yeah.
whether or not I would have it would have ever come out. I think not.
Do you see, looking back on your life, though, how that underlying unaware trauma affected your life? Can you see that?
Yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
went
Yeah.
through months of therapy talking about it. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. I had but that you adapt to it.
True.
And
It's your
so
normal. It's your
yeah,
normal.
yeah. So I didn't trust people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had almost no close relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have issues with attachment and abandonment. Um, I don't like to be in the spotlight. It was kind of like it was almost a lesson I learned, an unspoken lesson that I learned from my father. Um, and so I had built this wall around me
Mm-hmm.
that protected me. But it didn't allow for um, maybe normal relationships. I remember telling my therapist how I was al- I was always worried about, and this is the kind of paranoia that comes with the intergenerational trauma side of it, is that I was always worried about losing my job. I was
Mm.
winning awards for the top employee, and and I was always worried that I was one step away from getting fired.
Yeah, me too. I did that too. I was always worried about losing my job, and I had the pressure if I was the one that was working. So, hey, thank you for listening so far. If you're enjoying this podcast, be sure to subscribe so you won't ever miss an episode.
Yeah. And
Interesting.
so, and I think you were asking me about the book, right?
Yeah, about the book and the
Okay.
whole what you know about the intergenerational trauma and how it affected you
Yeah.
and
So
yeah.
this book is not a true memoir. And it's interesting because I'm actually teaching a course, a workshop online on writing memoirs. And I the first thing I say is if you read my memoir, it's not a true memoir, but you can do whatever you want. But uh, so the first part of the book talks about my family's history prior to the Holocaust and through the Holocaust. That's not really a memoir. Um, And then I and then a good chunk of the book is about my life growing up. And then I get into intergenerational trauma, mine, and a little bit about the sort of research and studies on it. Not too much. And then the end piece um, is about the history of anti-Semitism. because it's not
Mm.
kind of all related. And that's kind of what the book looks like. There were in doing the research, there were some incredible things that I learned about my family that I had no clue about. My father, he never spoke about his the pre-war life. He spoke a little bit about his experience in concentration camps. He was in
Mm.
7 concentration camps. Um, and uh, and and a little bit about it after liberation. What I didn't even know the names of the camps they was in. Maybe one or two that he might have mentioned. I didn't. He never. He had 5 siblings, 3 of which survived along with him, and 2 sisters who perished.
Mm.
I didn't even know the names of his sisters.
Mm.
It was only through doing research that I uncovered their names and where they were born, and um, I didn't know anything about my grandparents. Um, and he talked a lot about losing his family. He during the war in the ghetto, he he was married. He got married, and as it turns out, he had 2 children. But he only told us that he lost his wife and a child. Um, and there was very little detail. And he used to talk about he lost his 4-year-old child, and it didn't make much sense to me. And he didn't know. I didn't. It never said how they were killed, just that the Nazis had killed them. So I started doing some research, and I got access to information from Polish archives, and they list in the archives kept track of marriages, births, and deaths that were registered
Mm.
prior to the war. Actually, well, up until 42, I guess, 1942, and then the town was liquidated.
Mm.
And I remember I wanted to know when my father was married and when my half sister, her name was Leah, was born, because he always talked about her being 4 years old. So I figured I could work backwards and figure out when she died, or work it. So I get this, I get these records, and it's my father's marriage registration and registration for 2 daughters, and no one in the family knew.
Mm.
My mother used to repeat the same thing, that he had lost a wife and a daughter, and so she did not know. It
Mm.
was so that's trauma where I don't know why, but uh, maybe the memory of the younger daughter was so painful that he just buried it. And
Yeah.
and so what I discovered was I've actually, through doing a lot of historical studies and so on and so forth, and I have one surviving Holocaust survivor cousin, a first cousin. She's 97 now, and I able to ask her some questions, but her memory is not so good anymore. But I was able to figure out when they perished. And
Mm.
so that 4-year-old daughter that my father spoke about, she actually perished at the age of 27 months. And
Oh.
her younger sister at 11 months. And
Oh.
but he was sort of that 4-year-old. He was based on when she was born. He was sort of counting based on, like, at the end of the near the end of the war, when he was about to be released.
Oh.
That was like, it made no sense.
Well,
And
I'm sure
so,
there's a lot of things that are probably that were really fuzzy for him just because
oh,
of the situation he was. I mean, you don't even know where you're at.
so that's kind of that was a huge shock for the family,
Yeah.
because we had no clue. And so my father, he the other thing I'll talk a little bit about is that we were a replacement family.
Mm. Because he lost his
And
first family.
right, he lost his
Mhm.
first family. And what does that mean? Um, well,
Did his first wife perish as well? The
yes, yes,
daughters?
they were both sent to Auschwitz in August of 42,
Oh god.
and they were sent directly into the gas chambers.
Oh my god, that's awful.
Um,
God,
yeah, and
this is
so
hard.
um, it kind of you feel like you're you almost feel like you're second best, right? That
Yeah, I could
like
see that.
and also my father, he never he never got over the grief.
Yeah.
And so here you are, you're your son, but he's still grieving for someone else.
Yeah, and
And
probably never fully grieved, right? Because
no, I
back in
inherited that grief.
right, and back in the day, there wasn't time to grieve. You had to work. You had to have family that you had to support. You didn't have time for that. And
Well,
there wasn't the help out there.
also, there's a whole mourning process
Right.
where somebody dies, you bury them, you have a service. In the Jewish religion, you have Shiva, which is like visitation, but instead of before the funeral, it's after. You don't experience any of that.
You don't get closure.
You don't have any
Mm-mm.
closure, and so you just carry around a lot of grief and anger.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I would say that would be the best way to describe my dad.
Mm.
And
How long between the first family and the second family? How many years?
so my father was liberated in 45, in April of 45. Um, he kind of bounced around Germany for 3 years, and he arrived after Israel was gained independence. He arrived in something like September of 48. He
Mm.
married my mother. He met her in Israel and married her in March of 49.
Okay. So there's a few years that he
And then my
had.
sister was born at the end of that year.
Mhm.
She was born in Israel, and they they immigrated to Canada in 1953. And my brother and I were born in Canada.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. So was my dad.
Oh, we're in Canada.
Esteban?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. And then when he was about I I think he was about 3 years old, they came down and lived in Minnesota.
Hmm.
So he became a citizen.
So it would be a little warmer,
Little bit.
a little
Not
warmer.
much.
Okay, and so just talking about intergenerational trauma.
Right.
It was like something I first learned about it because it was this groundbreaking book that came out in 79.
Oh.
Yeah, it was written by a woman named Helen Epstein, a social worker. Her parents were Holocaust survivors, and she was born in Prague, I believe. They were, and then they immigrated to New York. She's written 15, 16 books by now.
What's her name
Eh,
again?
Helen Epstein.
Okay.
And the book it's on my bookshelf, Children of the Holocaust, I believe.
Okay. Interesting.
And it's been reprinted many times.
That's interesting.
It was a groundbreaking book.
Oh yeah.
She went around the world, interviewed hundreds of children of Holocaust survivors. Kind of like what I did. But
Mhm.
the difference was, and I've actually reached out to her. The difference was that everyone she interviewed was uh, they were under 30 because it was because
Oh.
she interviewed them in the 70s, and so
Sure.
all the children were born after 45,
Sure.
and so she was interviewing young adults. When I when I did my research, I'm interviewing the same people. Well, not the identical same people, but the
Mm,
same
type of
group,
people.
and
Yeah.
they're in their 60s and 70s now.
Oh, I bet there's such a difference in those 2
Oh my
books.
god, it's like
Oh, yeah.
so it's totally different.
Yeah.
They've raised families now.
Mhm.
They've many in most cases their parents are no longer around, and excuse me, they're at the age where you start to really do a lot of reflection on your life.
Yes,
And so it's a
exactly.
very different perspective. And I
Yeah.
interviewed the next generation as well, about 20. So they were third generation, they were grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. I wanted to see how much different they were,
Right,
if
right.
they were at all.
Yeah.
And there's no difference. They
Mm.
carried the same trauma. So, what is intergenerational trauma? Um, uh, because everybody knows there's so many different forms of trauma. It can be as a result of sexual abuse, physical abuse, um, or or just your everyday emotional abuse from childhood trauma.
Mhm.
It could be a catastrophic event. You could be in a war. All this stuff, but intergenerational trauma is, and so you're exposed to a traumatized individual. Intergenerational trauma is different because I can't, and I'm not a scientist or anything like that, but I am told that trauma is buried in your body
Yes.
and can alter your genes,
Gets into your
and as a
DNA.
result, it can be passed on
Yes.
to you without being traumatized by your parents.
Correct.
And so there's all these things that I now see were things that I inherited. They
Mhm.
weren't. First, I don't have my father's anger, but I certainly inherited his avoidance of being in the spotlight. And
Mm.
why did he have that? Well, because when you're in a concentration camp, you never really want to be noticed. You
Right.
want to just
That
kind
makes
of
sense.
blend into the crowd because
Mhm.
those who are noticed could be beaten or killed.
Mhm.
And so, for instance, you learned if you're marching to he did forced labor, and so you would march to the factory, maybe in a group in rows of five. You don't want to be on the outside because they're the ones most likely to get beaten.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how so intergenerational trauma is kind of trauma that you inherit from someone who survived the trauma.
Mhm.
And um, maybe some of the best example I have of, and not only is trauma inherited, but memories as well.
Mm. What do you mean by that?
So I have a perfect example. I interviewed a woman, um, and she told me her parents were not Holocaust survivors. I think she told me her dad was the first in her family to be born in America, and her grandparents were Holocaust survivors.
Mm.
And she told me that when her son, one of her kids, was first able to talk, 3, 4 years old, he woke up one day and he was crying and grabbing onto his mother. Don't let me go. I don't want them to take me. I don't want them to put me on a train. And she was in total shock. Total shock. He had no exposure to anything that went on during the war.
Mhm.
He's too young. And uh, she told me that her grandparents, when they were in I think they lived in Warsaw, perhaps, if I recall, and they were being shipped to Auschwitz by train. And on the train station, a guard pulled a child out of her grandmother's hands and threw it on another car in the train, and they never saw that child again. That was the memory
Oh
that the
God.
child dreamt about. So, um,
Ugh.
so part of it is not only inheriting trauma, but memories as well. And I had other examples like that as well. So that goes sort of beyond what when we were talking about Helen Epstein, those are things that she did not see. And so I
Yeah.
remember when I sent her a list of questions, she goes, I don't know. She goes, you're way ahead of me.
Hey, if you're ready to go deeper in your healing journey, join my 8-week workshop where we're going to help you get rid of all the bullshit that came from your childhood abuse and help you take back your power. Sign up today at women's childhood abuse healing workshop.com or click on the link below. I'd love to see you there and help you get on your healing journey. Wow. I mean, 1979, I didn't realize they knew that
Hmm.
information back then.
That was the first, pretty much
Wow.
early.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we were talking about, we were talking about before we started recording and, the effects of the trauma. And this is for so many of us that there weren't the protections in place for children. There still isn't enough, in my opinion. But, for instance, I shared with you, like when I was young, there were no laws protecting the children from abuse. So at the time, when my brother used to hit me, if somebody would have called the police, they wouldn't have done anything. So there wasn't anything in place here in the United States until like the 1980s, early 90s. So that kind of fits right in that arena when they really probably started looking into trauma and how it affects
Right. And so,
everybody.
we all know that mental health services were lagged behind other kind of medical services for quite a while. So Holocaust survivors, uh, they were they released from camps or came out from hiding or from the woods, and they went about restoring their lives, starting all over again. Um, and they were left on their own.
Yeah,
There
that
were no
we were talking
Yeah,
about that
there were
before.
no
There was
service, no type of any kind of services.
right.
No social services, no mental health services. They just had to they worked their butts off,
Yeah.
and for many of them, that was the focus of their lives,
Right.
is to build new families, new lives, and start all over again
Mhm.
somewhere else other than Europe.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so when I interviewed all these people, I kind of shocked to learn that a good percentage of them, and I don't have the exact numbers, but if I was to throw a number out, I'd say 15% of the people I spoke to had a parent who kind of just they had a mental breakdown
Mhm.
and were institutionalized, but they didn't even have drugs to treat people at the time,
Mm-mm.
and all the only treatment they had was like electroshock therapy, which is kind of like pretty sad.
Mhm.
There was one person I spoke to, and because I was writing up that piece this morning, but she's a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, and her grandmother would shriek and scream and curse 5 6 hours every night.
Oh
Every
God.
night. She was a so
Mm.
severely traumatized. And she told me that her dad would say she was the best mother ever. And he was like so damaged. But
Yeah.
I think why he said that was when she wasn't psychotic, she was a great mother, a loving mother. But she like couldn't get through a night without just totally losing it.
Mhm.
And so, and she told me that, this woman I interviewed, her father is very, very damaged himself, because if you can't you can't live in a home like that and not be affected.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. So so you have discovered your trauma from your intergenerational trauma. What type of therapy has helped you?
Um, I've been doing talk therapy.
Mhm.
Uh, it's been very effective for me because it's allowed me and for me it worked the best because I do a lot of overthinking anyways.
Yeah,
And
well, welcome to the club.
yeah, and so it allowed me to do a lot of sort of self-reflection and
Mhm.
processing, and with the guidance of the therapist, I work through a lot of things, but I'm still getting triggered.
Right. Mhm.
And so I've just recently started EMDR therapy.
I've done that, and I've really it's that's been really helpful for me as well. Yeah, that's a good one.
I haven't gotten very far yet,
Mhm.
and but there's no one I have met yet who said they didn't benefit from it. So
Right, right. It really did a lot for me. It really accelerated my healing process. And the one thing that it helped me with, which was really interesting, and at the time it felt strange, and I didn't know if it was even real because it felt so strange. But then I found out somebody else had done the same thing. But it had allowed me to talk to little Lisa and come along little Lisa and support her so she would have a voice. 'Cause she didn't have a voice for many years. It's really kind of an interesting technique, but it really helped put things into perspective for me.
and I remember I had a major kind of I came crashing down last May,
Mm,
and I remember that night where I swear I was just an uh, 8-year-old version of me,
hmm.
totally lost, no clue what to do. You know, and I basically was in this. I don't know. I can't even put words to it, but it took me several months to climb out of that hole.
Well, this was buried deep within you for a long, long time. So, I mean, even those of us who've started our journey younger, it's a journey. I mean, for me, I believe that it's a journey till you take your last breath. You just learn how to manage it a lot better. So, I think you've
Yeah,
done a lot in a very short amount of time.
yeah. I think that's probably true. I My therapist will tell you that I never stopped working on it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
and yeah, it's kind of really weird, kind of strange. I don't know that at this age that I've kind of gone through this whole transformation.
Mhm.
And which I think the message is anybody who thinks they're too old, no, no such thing.
Exactly. That's right.
Whenever it's time, it's time. And I'm probably a better version of myself than I've ever been.
Mhm.
And the fact that I'm here even talking about this stuff, and constantly talking to groups and doing a lot of Holocaust education now and awareness is not something I would have ever done in the past.
Mhm.
And so for me, it's worked out amazing, and I no regrets.
Oh,
There
that's
was
good to
I
hear.
went through I went through a year of cursing my wife for talking me into writing that memoir, which I've since apologized many times. But I blamed her. Who else was I going to blame?
Right, right. So, do you have any children?
I have a daughter and I have two grandsons.
And so, what's their feelings about this? Like, because if it was passed down to you and you weren't aware until now, then it's been passed down to them as
Oh, well,
well.
I can tell you, my daughter will tell you that she's fine, but she's not. It's okay. She's in therapy too.
Oh,
So
good,
there you go.
good.
There you go.
Excellent,
Before
excellent.
me,
Oh,
before I was.
okay. All right.
Um, and did she have a traumatized childhood? No. Um, but there's stuff that she inherited. Um,
Mhm.
uh, my mother, which we haven't even talked about her, but my mother, she was not as affected as my father. Her experience was also very different than
Mm.
his. Uh, but she suffered from, now I look back and I realize, a lot of depression.
Mhm.
And I think that there are members of the family who have inherited that depression
Mhm.
as well, including my
Yes.
daughter. As for my
Yes.
grandsons, they're 6 and 8, and um, um, I keep an eye on them, a close eye on them for signs,
Mhm.
because nobody will be able to pick them up better than me.
Right. Yeah.
And they seem to be doing okay. They know about the book, but they can't read it yet.
Too young. Yeah.
They I have read them portions that are appropriate, and
Mhm.
so they will slowly, and also they will be learning it in school, the Holocaust,
Right.
and
Right.
so and educators know how to do this,
Mhm.
and so and I will supplement. So
Mhm.
my the older one, the 8-year-old, told me this weekend that he's dying to read The Diary of Anne Frank.
Oh, I read
And
that. Yes.
yeah, he
Yeah.
already knows about
Yeah.
they've already talked about World War II, and he's in grade 3. Um,
Wow. I
yeah.
remember sitting with that book. I think I read it in a weekend. My
W-
mom was like, "Can't you put that book down?" I was so intrigued
Yeah.
by it.
Oh, he will be. But
Mhm.
they're in a Jewish private school,
Okay.
and so it's introduced
Oh, good.
earlier.
Yes, and
And so I
appropriately.
told him 10 years old, I would say it's okay to read,
Mhm.
especially with the background he'll have by then.
Right.
He already knows there was a Holocaust. He just doesn't really know what happened.
Yeah, all the details. Yeah.
No, he doesn't need to know yet.
No.
And
Yeah.
so and so I'm hoping that, with the right kind of intervention, that we can stop the transmission, because I can tell you that my sister has 3 kids who are as messed up as the rest of us.
Mhm.
So it didn't stop with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that that uh, that for my grandkids, they will um, maybe not need as much therapy as the rest of us.
Well, I think just the fact that they have people watching them, that there's open dialogue, there's, that you're aware of it, your daughter's aware of it, and that there's a safe place for them to come when it's time. I think
Right,
all of that is what helps us break that
right.
generational
So
trauma.
because so many survivors, the majority, but not all, did not tell their children anything, or very, very little, because
Yeah,
they were told you don't need to know, or in other words, they were trying to protect them,
right.
or they were trying to protect themselves
Yeah.
because it was too traumatizing to talk
Hmm.
about.
Yeah.
Some were very, I mean, there are some that were very open, or some, there are different patterns. They opened up later in life.
Right.
Um, and, but when children aren't told, in every case, it just creates a lifelong need to find out.
Right.
And
Right.
if you have to find out, like when I did after your parents are gone, it's quite a challenge.
Yeah.
And most people would not have done the kind of intense research that I did.
Right.
It took me 2 years. And in fact, I even went to Poland. I went in
Mm.
2022.
Mm. Did you go visit sites?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I
Mm.
found my grandparents' apartment,
Ooh, wow.
and where um, the building where my family, when they did their selections, they used a building across the street from the train station in that town to keep people in until they loaded them up in trains. The sports field where they did the selection,
Oh my God.
the train station's still there, and the town was about 20 miles, 25 miles from Auschwitz. I went to Auschwitz, saw exactly where my family was murdered.
Oh my God. Sorry.
Um, it was not easy.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I just can't even imagine doing that. Oh, sorry.
It was tough. It was
Yeah.
so difficult.
Yeah.
And um, my father was born in another village, and they moved in 1930. And I got someone to take us up to the village. That that village, at the start of the war, had about 2,500 people. 1,500 were Jewish. My family had lived there for several centuries.
Oh, wow.
I looked up some records and found that our surname was the third most common in that village. So
Wow.
there was a lot of family there. Um, so I went up there to see, and there is no trace of the Jewish community. There are no Jews living there. There's 900 people there, but none are Jewish. And this is very common in Poland. The entire Jewish population was um, eliminated. Um, the market square where my family had their businesses was now a park. The synagogue, there was one synagogue in the town,
Hmm.
and it is now a Soviet Union apartment building. And I went to where the cemetery had been, and nothing but overgrown reeds and um, little fragments of what used to be gravestones. The Germans had, which is kind of common during the war, they used gravestones for paving stones, and
Oh,
whatever was left, the local population at the end of the war, the local population used for various things. Not very sure. So
yeah.
that's kind of what I found, and that's kind of what you see when you travel across Poland, um,
Mm.
in small little villages. There's nothing
Hmm.
left. Even the town that they moved to, it was a city of about 50,000,
Mm.
which was the one that was 25. It's called Benzin. Is about 25 miles from Auschwitz. There were 50,000 people living there. Half of them were Jewish, so it had a very vibrant Jewish community. It
Hmm.
wasn't like, it wasn't like 100 families or something like that. No Jews living there anymore. Uh, and so that's kind of like what Poland is like. And though they're sort of going through a sort of a Jewish revival, they have they have this huge Jewish festival in Krakow every year, even though there's like almost no Jews living there, and people come from all over.
Mm.
Sort of, it's like a Jewish cultural event,
Hmm.
and so it was a difficult trip, but certainly worthwhile.
Yeah. Wow. I know. I just can't even imagine the emotions and the thoughts going through that. And I can't even imagine. So, what are you doing about your intergenerational trauma now? I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, your questions about this episode, or really anything that has to do with trauma. So you can comment below, or you can reach out to me at asklisatickle@gmail.com. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. You're in EMDR,
Right.
you're in therapy,
Um,
writing books, very
Writing
interesting
books.
books.
And I'll tell you, my therapist last week, the MDR therapist says, "Okay, what are you doing when you're triggered?" And I
Yeah.
said, "I write an article. I write a blog post. That's it." They're going, "Yeah, that's how I that's how I deal with it. That's what a writer would do." And
Yeah.
so, and also, whereas a year and a half ago I was terrified about talking about this stuff, now
Yeah.
it's kind of um, now it's sort of a little, it's cathartic, right?
Yes.
It was interesting. I One of the common questions I used to get asked was, "Oh, was writing your book cathartic?" No,
Yeah. It's
no,
triggering.
it was incredibly triggering.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now that talking about it is much more cathartic. So I really have a really good hold of it. Though I have to tell you, I those interviews I did 97 interviews, not 100, but a couple of people canceled on me. Um, but those were incredibly difficult to do.
I can
Um,
imagine.
and some of them were very triggering. My
Mhm.
therapist was begging me to stop or
Yeah.
at least cut back on my schedule.
Yeah.
Um, but I got through them, and so these stories themselves they help me, and they're going to help others when that book comes out. That book is very much being anticipated, and even clinicians are eager to see what I come up
I
with.
bet. I bet. You just gave a great example though of what happens when you haven't done your healing and when you have done some of your healing, how you say, a year and a half ago you couldn't even tell this story. It would be just too much to where now it's cathartic for you to tell the story. And that's what's really interesting that people don't realize that, so many people who are on the beginning of their healing journey, it's hard for them to talk about this stuff or they just flat out can't. But it does get to a point as you work on your healing journey that you can share these stories and they don't have the effect. I can tell stories now and it's almost like I'm telling someone else's story. It's not mine anymore. It doesn't have that effect. I'm
Exactly.
not reliving it anymore.
Right. Exactly. And so the message is, I guess, it is that if you've started this journey, don't give up.
Right.
I tried and I couldn't.
Twice.
Right, twice. Oh, I don't need this anymore. I'm fine. I remember one day after I had a very tough session the next week, I'm going, you know what? I'm okay now.
Yes.
And she goes, well, do you want to maybe like cut back? No, no, I'm fine now. Well, I was back within 2 weeks,
Yes.
and,
Yes.
and,
Yes.
and, like begging to come
Yeah.
back. So, but yeah, and so now I tell her, well, you got me for life because
Oh,
I'm afraid to quit.
I know. I know.
You
I
get
agree.
you come kind of attached,
You do.
uh,
And they
and
understand you. They understand you.
yeah, no one understands me better than my therapist. But you know
Exactly.
what? And getting attached to therapists, I learned is not a negative thing. I used to think it that way. I used to. I I I was angry with her a few times,
Hmm.
and she was so understanding. She knew. She understood.
She's
She
a safe
never.
place.
Oh my god, she's incredible. So, but you stick with your journey because
Hmm.
you will heal. You will
Hmm.
heal, and you'll feel so much better about yourself and people
Yes.
around you, you and you never know where you're going to land. That transformation that you're going through
True.
can be incredible, and I'm a testament to that. That I'm doing stuff I never ever imagined I'd be doing, including podcasts like this. Um, I have lined up in April is Holocaust Memorial Day.
Mm.
But there's two. There's one that the UN did in January, but the official one um, is for the Jewish people is in April, and I have two major speaking engagements lined up and a podcast on a so for a Jewish-based media
Good.
podcast in April. So that's a very big month, and I'm not the least bit anxious about it. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's just taking your pain and turning it into something good and paying it forward and helping others. Because that's
Right.
what you're doing. By getting this message out, you're helping a lot of people, and not just people who are, Holocaust survivors, right? Or their children. You're helping a lot of people by sharing about the therapy and how important it is.
And it's a strange thing because those people that I interviewed, well, they kind of a portion of them really connected with me.
I'm sure.
And part of the reason is one of the trends that I found is that people never really, descendants of survivors don't talk about their experience and their feelings.
Right.
They don't feel there's anybody they can talk to about it.
Who can
Those
understand?
who have not been in therapy,
Right.
especially, there were a couple people who told me you're the first person I've told my story to, or
Mm-hmm.
you're the first person who really understands me.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these people, when they've have a personal crisis, have reached out
Mm-hmm.
because, and I say, why are you reaching out? Well, because you would understand.
Oh.
And so this is another role that I never
Mhm.
anticipated, and so which I don't mind doing.
Yeah, it's actually really rewarding.
Right, it is rewarding and it's not triggering for me, and
Mhm.
so and I'm really getting triggered less and less.
Yes.
Uh,
Well, and you learn to manage your triggers rather than them managing you. So even, like for me, even when I get triggered, I know how I can catch it ahead of
right,
time.
right. Or, instead of going through a week of being miserable,
Yes.
it's in a couple hours.
Correct. Right. Yeah, the
Yeah,
misery is
so you
shortens.
can get yourself out a lot easier and quicker.
Correct. Yes.
So, and so I don't, and so that's who I'm doing this memoir writing workshop for. It's for people that I had interviewed. A lot of them are people I interview because so
Mhm.
many of them said they would love to write their parents' story or write a memoir, something like
Yes.
that. So I decided I have like 40 people that I'm
Wow.
that I've that have signed up, uh, and so this again is something that I'm sort of giving back, and
Mhm.
because I know that for many of them it's very important for them, but I also think that it can be very healing for them in the
Oh,
end.
absolutely. Yes. Yes. So many of my guests come on and they share their stories, and almost all of them, one way or another, are paying it forward. So many of us who are victims,
Mm.
surviving victims, that's what we want to do. We want to pay it forward.
Yeah, I kind of someone um, when I was going through a difficult time, I had a very close friend who we um, kind of fell apart. I think a lot had to do with the American election.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's done a number on a
it
lot of
kind of
people.
really messed up a lot of people. But
Hmm.
for a for quite a period of time, I lean on this person heavily,
Mm.
and it really made such a difference. And now there's two people who were kind of leaning on me, and I feel I have an obligation to do so
Hmm.
because someone did it for me,
Right.
and so and it helped me a lot, and I have to pay it back by helping others.
Me too. Me too. Making beauty from ashes.
Maybe I'll do a podcast next.
There you go. There you go. An interview. Yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be a fascinating one. Well, let me ask you this. I ask all my guests this. What do you want to
Yes.
leave our listeners with?
Um. Okay. Um. That's interesting. Uh, well, if you read my book, there's a there's a very distinct message in there about um, hate.
Mm.
And and that's the kind of message I want to leave people with, is that ha- hate really, when directed at other people, can destroy them and at the same time destroy yourself.
Exactly.
And so I'm a anti-hate person,
Mhm.
and there's no hate inside of me. And to me, that's a very important message. But as well, this whole, it's a dual message as well, because that is what I that's what I learned from the Holocaust.
Mhm.
And but it's an important message because there's still so much hate in the world.
Yeah, there is.
The other, of course, is that if you're a trauma victim, there is there's hope for you, that you can heal. Um, you can never get rid of trauma. It's inside of you, but you can certainly learn how to manage it and be happier, and maybe transform who you are into a much better version.
So true. To who you were supposed to be originally, before the trauma.
Yeah, I thought I was. There was a part where this friend that I mentioned, and I would say, "Ah, I wish I hadn't written that book. I regret it. I wish I could go be that person I was before this." But and she said right away, she going, "You can't ever go back."
Mm-mm.
And so I had to find my way forward and
Mhm.
find a new happier version of me.
Right.
And I'm at the point now, that I would never want to go back.
Mhm. Yes, I get that.
And
Yeah, I totally under
that's where people should be aiming
correct.
for a place where you've never been this happy, and that you don't want to go back to where you were before.
Exactly. Oh, that's beautifully said and so true. So, Willie, if people want to reach out to you, how could they connect with you? How could they reach out and connect with you?
Let me see. There's so many ways.
And we'll
If
have this
you're
all in the show notes too, so you could just
right,
name a few
so
if you
if you
want.
want to reach out to me, um, I I'm kind of transitioning. I have a website and blog, but the blog I'm kind of shutting down and transitioning to Substack.
Okay.
And I have a newsletter that's transitioning to Substack as well, because Substack is a great platform for writers. And
Mhm.
so, but I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. So if you search for Willie Handler on either one, you will find me. But on Substack, um, there are these really great um, articles that I've written on various topics, and you can reach out to me there as well, because it's an all-encompassing thing. So
Mhm.
it's like a blog, and you can have discussions on it,
Oh.
and people um, can send you messages, and you can go back and forth. You can leave comments on articles. So it's a very, very versatile platform. It's not that old, but it's growing rapidly.
What's your website address?
It is williehandler.com.
Okay. Okay.
So williehandler.com, and if you do a search on Substack, you'll find me, Willie Handler. On my blog, there's information about my family's history, and my books, and my grandson has a page on my website because his parents told him he can't have his own website.
So that's beyond grandpa's.
So go look for Jordan's page on my website.
Aw.
Jordan has written two books that he
Oh.
sent, and he's provided the profits to charities.
Oh, bless his heart. How old is he?
He's now 8.
Wow.
He kind of models himself after his
Yeah,
grandfather.
I was gonna say that's what I was seeing exactly. That's so
He
sweet.
has the same sense of humor, and he never stops talking.
Oh, bless his heart. Well, that's really sweet. And Willie, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story. And I know you said it doesn't affect you when you share the story, but I know that it's a really important stories, and this is really important information. And it's so good to hear from somebody who's actually experienced it. You know, the intergenerational trauma that's so prevalent, that's so obvious, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because so many of us are also dealing with it, but it's not quite so obvious. So thank you for sharing your story, and for doing the healing journey, and paying it forward.
Thank you. And it was a pleasure meeting you, Lisa, and having the opportunity to talk about this.